الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم أرنا حقائق الأشياء كما هي اللهم ربنا زدنا علما وعملا وإخلاصا وحلما يا رب العالمين اللهم ربنا كن لإخواننا في فلسطين وغزة وليا ونصيرا اللهم انصرهم على عدوك وعدوهم نصرا مبينا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله تعالى على رسول خير خلقه محمد وآله وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين آمين. Okay, so we are continuing with Hallaq. Muslims today, including their leading intellectuals, I don't know who are these leading intellectuals, have come to take the modern state. So that's the modern state is talking for granted. And by that he means natural reality. I mean, in a sense, everyone. So there are many different types of necessities. But one type of necessity is, so there are many types of necessities. Philosophers talk about logical necessity. Kant, for example, talked about transcendental necessity, which is different from logical necessity. Hume, for example, talked about habitual necessity. You find that in ilm al-mantiq and ilm other Islamic disciplines as well, this habitual necessity. And some French historians, and I think Michel Foucault took it from them, they talk about historical necessity. Michel Foucault talk about historical a priori. Etc. So when he says that Muslims today take modern state for granted, we can even go above that and talk about modern way of life. I think it's normal that people would take for granted anything which is overwhelming and dominant. It's not unique to Muslim masses. And and the education system, especially the modern one, teaches us that and ingrains it. Because if the modern civilization is the outcome of knowledge-based adventures, then it is in a sense the end of history. So what masses take the prevailing system is as that necessity is habitual necessity. Now the intellectuals he is talking about my take. I mean, those who are impressed by the reality around them, especially who believe in the power of modernity, power of science and technology, and believe that the dominance of West is due to science and technology, that is due to knowledge. You would hear this from even some Muslim scholars. So if it's a knowledge-based dominance, it can only be overcome by another more advanced knowledge-based dominance. So especially those intellectual who are modernists, whether they are Muslims or nominal Muslims or actually practicing Muslim, if they are modernists, they believe in the superiority of modernity. I mean, they might lament some certain deviations, like especially in spiritual and moral matters, which they think that Islam is a way to avoid those deviations. So they might see modern civilization is actually as a culmination of human history, including, and Islam played a large role in it, and now it's our mission to reform the civilization, and this is not going to go away, etc., because it's the outcome of the millennia of progress, all that, and essentially not against Islam anyway. You just need to reform it. Okay, so what were we talking about? So modern state is obviously a great part of that civilization. So it's understandable that masses, due to a habitual necessity, think it is invincible. Not governments, but state. Okay, and the intellectual think it as a form of necessity as well, but necessity which is outcome of the human progress. But modern state is, with modernity, has historical necessity in the sense that as long as it is dominant, it's necessary. So it's not that it is a transcendental necessity or logical necessity which cannot be overcome, but it is a historical necessity, and it can only be overcome, or its necessity would be overcome only when it actually start giving way to something else. And so modern state is effect. Its domination, its overwhelming nature is effect. And as one Mauritanian scholar is said to have, is reported to have said that denying facts is mahal, it's impossible. So there is so denying fact is a sort of impossibility, and facts have certain necessity as long as they are facts. So this historical necessity can be confused with other forms of necessity. But the point I wanted to make was that we can't take historical necessity as lightly. Historical necessity, more than habitual necessity, it is almost at par with a logical necessity, as long as it is our reality. So to say that modern state is not natural is true, theoretically. And there was no modern state 300 years ago, for example, and hopefully there won't be any modern state 200 years from hence, for example. So in that sense, it is not natural. There were mountains 300 years ago, and there would be mountains 200 years here afterwards. So in that sense, the way mountains are natural, modern state is not natural. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have necessity, historical necessity. And as long as this historical necessity has its grip on reality and on us, it is as good as natural. So that's what I wanted to say. So they often assume it is not only to have existed throughout the long course of their history, but that also to have been sanctioned by no less than authority of the Quran itself. But here, as we saw last time, he is confusing modern state with a state. What Quran sanction is a state, but modern state is a specific form of state which we are trying to overthrow, in the sense that state is exactly the opposite of Islam. So as long as this state is dominant, Islam is maghlub, is dominated, and it is not in the nature of Islam to be dominated. Even nationalism, an unprecedented phenomena and one uniquely considered modern. Uniquely constitutive. Nationalism is not an unprecedented phenomena, but modern form of nationalism in a sense. So state is a form of human association. As a form of human association which is based on a legitimate use of force and violence, and whose purpose is to provide order and security for any human association. In that sense, it is something semi-universal. We can't think of human societies without a state in that sense. A modern state is a specific state, different from other states in that it is totalizing. It encompasses all human life in that, and regulates it and manages it. So it is, and it is defined by huge concentration of power and capital. In a sense, it is a capitalist state, in that its sole purpose of existence is to make freedom possible, or accumulation for the sake of accumulation possible. And this state takes, this search for freedom takes three forms: an individual, group, and species level. So individual, that's sort of liberal state. Group, that's sort of national state at the group level, and species level, that's sort of socialist and communist state. So modern state can be a liberal state, national state, and socialist state. But in reality, the modern state has existed as a combination of these three elements. And nationalism has played an important part in modern state. But if by nationalism is constitutive of modern state, he means that nationalism, modern state, that's the raison d'etre of the modern state, then that's not true. Raison d'etre of the modern state is to provide freedom, that is, increase capital, and give people rights, both liberal and welfare rights. And some of so in that sense, that's not entirely true. Modern state is a combination of individual, national, and species level elements, and sort of a combination of those elements. That's true. In a sense, that's true that modern state hasn't been able to be other than national state. So nation does remain its foundation. And that's a contradiction of this state, because the capital is universal, while the state organization at the national level. So there's always contradiction between this aspiration of the nation and the aspiration of the state as regard to its raison d'etre, which is accumulation for the sake of accumulation. And that leads to contradiction in modern political organization, modern capitalism, and modern organization of modern state as well. But to say that nationalism is uniquely modern is not true in the sense that nations have existed always. But in a political sense, it's something new, yes, but its foundation is based on fear of the other and the jealousy, which are, universal phenomena that have been around as long as human beings have been around. So the modern way of life doesn't create new thing. It bases itself on old human voices, the voice of greed and covetousness, that is jealousy. So and that's the basis of capitalism, greed and covetousness. And in a former state where greed is more overwhelming, you will see more liberal bend in that, even though jealousy is important as well, although at the individual level. But when greed is subservient to jealousy, and the jealousy takes the form of group level jealousy, then you have nationalism is more overwhelming, etc. So what he is saying, what he is claiming are half truths, and it doesn't seem that there's a deep analysis involved in his understanding of modern state or nationalism or anything. But anyway, we'll stop here and we'll continue from here, inshallah.